Okay, realize I'm a little late with this one, but I finally saw Shin Godzilla, or Godzilla Resurgence, or whatever you want to call it. Hey, better late than never, right? So Shin Godzilla is the first Japanese-produced Godzilla movie in 12 years, and it was made by Hideki Anno, who made Neon Genesis Evangelion, as well as Shinji Higuchi, who did the effects for the 90s Gamera series, and if you've ever heard me talk about those, I think they're not only easily the best of the Gamera movies, they're some of the best kaiju movies ever made. So expectations for this one were pretty high, and the response to it, at least in the West anyway, has been pretty polarizing. A lot of people seem to either like this one or hate it, and having finally seen it, I can kind of see why. So to get everybody up to speed, this is a complete reboot of the series. It doesn't do the thing where whenever they want to start the series over, they do the thing where the first Godzilla movie is in continuity, and then the plot is that he's returning after several decades and they have to deal with his return. This one doesn't do that. In this one, it's the first time anybody's ever seen Godzilla, and a lot of the movie is focused on people reacting to him for the first time and figuring out how to stop him. The biggest complaint a lot of people seem to have is that it spends way too much time on the human characters and doesn't show Godzilla enough, which, I mean, if you've ever seen any other Godzilla movie, that's pretty much par for the course. Most of them are like that. You know, they have a few scenes of Godzilla, and the majority of the runtime focuses on the human characters. So that part is really nothing new. What I think is new about this is how the human scenes are done. In most other Godzilla movies, they do have scenes with the government and the military, but they're not the main focus of the human story. Usually, in a Godzilla movie, they'll have a small group of other characters who aren't connected to the military or the government, or maybe they're working with the government to figure out how to stop them, but they're not, you know, it's not important generals or government officials or anything like that, and most of the human story focuses on them. With this movie, it's all military and government characters. The majority of the movie is people in suits sitting in boardrooms discussing what to do, and a lot of the dialogue is based on protocol and making sure the right bureaucratic steps are taken. Like, for example, in another Godzilla movie, you might have a general coming up to the Prime Minister and saying, "Godzilla's attacking Tokyo, we gotta send out the military." Great, send out the military. And then the next scene is the military attacking Godzilla. Here, they show every single step that they have to take to get the military to go after Godzilla. So you have generals and different advisors talking to the Prime Minister and saying that there's civilians here, and if we do this, this could happen, but if we do this, this could happen, and we need to get approval from this section of government to take this action so that we can tell this person to do this, and so they can go here. And I suppose you could say this is a more realistic way to approach a Godzilla movie, but I don't know if we needed to see every single little bureaucratic step it takes to get the military to go do something. Another thing about the human story is just the sheer number of characters there are. There's something like, I think, 300 different speaking roles in this movie. And the movie will do a thing where a character will come on screen and they'll flash his name and whatever his governmental title is, and that'll make you think that this guy is a really important character that's going to be in the rest of the movie. And then that's the only scene they're ever in. You never see him again. So it's like, okay, well, thank you. Thanks for letting me know who the Ministry of Interior is for the 3 lines he had. So as a result of there being so many characters, you don't really latch on to any one of them. There's the Prime Minister, who he gets taken out of the picture halfway or 2/3 of the way through the movie. And then if I had to pick a main character, it would be this young guy who's kind of moving up the ranks of government and is hoping to be Prime Minister one day, and he kind of decides to dispense with all the red tape and stuff and just team up with this group of scientists and figure out the best way to stop Godzilla. But even there, this guy doesn't really have much of a personality. Most of the characters in this movie, their personality is just whatever their government job title is, and that's kind of it. So that's one way that this differs a little bit from other Godzilla movies. Because even other Godzilla movies, even when you don't really care about the human story that much, it at least gives you some characters that are the main focus of the movie that you can latch onto. And with this one, it's just sort of a series of people in business suits or generals or, you know, different government officials that have, and some of them only have a few lines each, and you don't really care that much about any of them. Another thing people had a problem with is the way Godzilla looks in this movie. I actually really like the way he looks here. It's true to the original Godzilla design, but it's still very distinct, and I like how he's got this really desiccated, almost zombie-like look to him. You know, it's like the radiation's eating him from the inside, yet he's still so godlike and powerful. So I really think that this is actually a really cool design. Or, okay, let me clarify. Godzilla's final form is a cool design. When he first appears, he's got this really goofy, googly-eyed, fish-like form that's kind of derpy. That one looks kind of weird, but the whole thing with Godzilla is that he's capable of self-mutation and almost self-evolution. So once he finally morphs into his final form, I think he looks really cool. My only problem is I don't like the scrawny arms. I think that looks a little out of place. Do some bicep curls, Godzilla. Now, one way where this movie really excels is in the scenes where Godzilla is attacking Tokyo. These are some of the best city destruction scenes that have ever been in a Godzilla movie. The scene where Godzilla first unleashes his radioactive breath is great, because not only does he breathe fire, but he's also able to focus it into like a laser-like beam. And when he first unleashes that, it's just cutting right through buildings and just completely razing everything in sight. It's a really, really great moment. There's also some really great shots, like of his tail whipping across houses that give you a great sense of how big and how powerful he is, and some scenes where it shows the inside of a building as it crumbles. In terms of just showing the destruction Godzilla is capable of, this is one of the best movies in the series ever, even if you don't get a whole lot of that. But when they do show it, it really delivers. Also, this is the first Japanese Godzilla movie where Godzilla is CGI instead of a man in a suit. Again, I actually didn't mind this. I think it's done actually pretty well. The original form, it's pretty obviously CGI, but Godzilla's final form actually works really well. In fact, I think some people thought that it was a guy in a suit, but it's not. It's all CGI. There was a movie put out in Japan a few years ago. I think it's called Sunset on 3rd Street or something like that. I'll put the title below. But that movie had a dream sequence featuring a computer-generated Godzilla, and I think that showed that a CGI Godzilla can work and still look like the traditional Godzilla. And they really do that here. They don't make him fast. He's still the same slow, lumbering, badass Godzilla he's always been. And even though the CGI, obviously, it can't compare to like a big-budget American movie, this is still easily the best CG that's ever been in a Japanese Godzilla movie, because the first attempts at doing a CGI Godzilla looked pretty fucking bad. But here I was actually quite impressed. This shows that if they decide to continue with the CGI Godzilla in the future, it'll work. It'll be Godzilla. When I mentioned earlier how polarizing this movie is, I was mainly talking about the West, because in Japan, this movie was a giant hit. It was one of the highest grossing movies of that year, and it even won, I think, the Japanese equivalent of Best Picture at their Academy Awards, and got tons of critical acclaim. I think it might be the highest rated Godzilla movie ever there. So Japanese audiences really, really took to this one, and I think that's probably because this is a very allegorical movie. This is probably the most allegorical Godzilla movie since the first one. Not only does it address the old concerns of nuclear weapons and radioactive waste and stuff like that, but a lot of it is influenced by the Fukushima disaster, or more specifically, the government's response to the disaster. And I think the scenes where the government's, there's all this red tape and they can't decide what to do and people end up getting hurt because of it, I think this is a critique of the Japanese government's response to Fukushima, which maybe wouldn't resonate as well with Western audiences. Another thing I want to say is that the ending to this movie hints at a very interesting idea. I'm not going to spoil it, but the way they discuss Godzilla's origins and what he's capable of, the very last shot kind of sequel baits a movie that could really take the series in an interesting direction, which I don't know if we're going to get that, since apparently Shin Godzilla 2 was canceled and they're just going to go with a shared universe thing, because I guess everybody wants to do the shared universe thing nowadays, but I guess we'll see how that goes. But provided they do go through with it, it's actually a really interesting idea that could provide a lot of ideas for sequels. So I have very mixed feelings about this movie, but like I said, in Japan, they loved it, and I don't think this was made with a Western audience in mind. I think the Toho made this movie specifically for a Japanese audience. And apparently it worked. Japanese audiences loved it, so, you know, maybe Toho was saying, you know what, America, you've got your own Godzilla series, we're gonna make a movie just for us. If you like it, great, but if not, hey, it wasn't meant for you. So, yeah, there's my thoughts on Shin Godzilla. I know I rambled quite a bit here, but like I said, my feelings on it were very mixed. The parts I liked, I really liked. I also was frustrated by a lot of parts, specifically just the, you know, reading subtitles of people discussing the proper steps to take to maybe take the first step to maybe tell somebody to take some military action against Godzilla. And I don't think this is going to end up on my top 10 list if I ever redo that. But having said that, I didn't hate this movie. There's some people who say this is the worst Godzilla movie ever, to which I say, really? Are you aware of the one where a chubby kid in short shorts daydreams about hanging out with Minya and he defeats this weird Muppet monster by jumping on a seesaw? This is worse than that? Really? Like, you know, this movie's definitely flawed, but it's hardly the worst moment in the Godzilla series, in my opinion. Okay, so there's my thoughts on Shin Godzilla. I'm gonna get back to editing a real edited video, and until next time.